Hey everyone, and welcome to Science in Real Time. This is the show where we sit down with the people pushing science forward and talk about what's really happening behind the breakthroughs. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We've got some incredible conversations coming your way. All right, let's get into it. Thank you so much for being here. It's such a pleasure to have you in Science in Real Time. I thought that it would be pretty fitting to start the conversation talking a little bit about who are you and what drew you into the life sciences.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation. So I actually started my career as an academic and professor, so a PhD in biology. And right around the time the Human Genome Project was getting going, I was lucky enough to get a first job in industry. And I loved it from the first day. I loved the complexity of the science and laying the science on top of the business questions and the fact that you have to deal with different people. And it was just a very multi-dimensional kind of a career. And at the same time, you're doing good for humanity. You're solving problems of infectious disease and cancer and doing discovery. So it checked a lot of boxes for me. There was a lot of human interaction, there was a lot of complex problem solving, and you were doing science to make people healthier and live longer. So it was a combination of all those things that really attracted me.
I've also heard and read about all the leadership positions that you've held within the life sciences, specifically helping transform companies like Illumina to Verogen. And I'm wondering if there has been any thread or philosophy that has carried you through your career.
I think I was always drawn to the leadership, organizational, and sort of commercial strategy challenges that a company that's going through rapid growth experiences. And I've been really fortunate to be at several of those companies.
Talking about leadership and growth, I was also wondering, what are some of the most defining decisions that you have seen in companies that enable this sustainable growth?
It's a really good question because sustainable growth in this industry is very challenging, particularly if you're a capital equipment company. You have to really anticipate where the market need is going to be. And in general, what I've seen is in rapidly growing companies, to the extent you can create a paradigm shift in the scientific process, you'll be successful. And then you have to develop the market to educate them about how to think about this new paradigm. PCR was a paradigm-changing technology. Genotyping at high throughput was paradigm-changing. High throughput next generation sequencing was paradigm changing. I think what Araceli is doing for drug discovery is paradigm changing. So that's sort of foundationally strategic in any kind of high growth company. The other big learnings are when the opportunity is there, you sort of swing for the fences. As an example, Illumina purchased a sequencing company when we were barely profitable, and the company we were buying, we paid more for that than our company was worth. Because we saw the future of next generation sequencing and that it could displace all the legacy technologies and it was going to be paradigm shifting. Araceli's investment in AI, they started as an instrument company with expertise in imaging and software development, but the fact that they've leaned into AI has opened up incredible dimensions of new ways of doing drug discovery that change the business model of big pharma. So you can be a very good instrument company, but to have sustained growth and be competitive and successful globally, you have to think very creatively and take big risks.
We've heard about this balance between scientific excellence and strategic clarity. And I'm wondering, what does that alignment look like in practice?
So there are kind of well-established mechanisms to do this. And the best way I've seen this done, particularly for larger companies, you have 100 new ideas. And you usually would do an annual review at a strategic planning meeting if we're going to be very tactical about it. And the technical team would have a list of 100 projects. And before you have your strategic planning meeting, your commercial team would do a preliminary commercial analysis of where this fits into your product roadmap, what's the market fit, what's the revenue potential, what's the competitive landscape. Not a McKinsey-esque deep dive, but a preliminary, what we'd call a concept or feasibility level. And I've actually been to meetings where the executive team with a lot of input from the commercial team will literally stack rank the ideas, draw a line and say, okay, we have a fixed budget for R&D it's X, and we can fund, and every project has an estimated expense related to it between the concept phase and the commercial launch, and a revenue potential and an ROI. And it's a very mathematical spreadsheet, but the conversation's not very mathematical, because that's where you start to uncover the real strategic value of a particular product, not just how much can we charge and how much does it cost to make it, but what's the strategic differentiator in the competitive landscape in 5 or 10 years of taking this path instead of that path. Once you've made that decision, the product development process would usually have phase gates. And so after you've decided these are the 10 projects we're going to make an investment in, you have a core team do a feasibility study. And that's technically validate, is this really possible? How much is it going to really cost? And you do a little bit deeper dive. And then maybe half of those projects make it through feasibility. Then you actually have a development project, 5 different things, and then you start funding those, and then you have your product at the end of it. But it starts with 100 brilliant creative ideas from the technology guys, and a little bit of input and oversight and research from the commercial guys, and then you just whittle it down. That's theoretically how it's supposed to work.
Would you then have a specific example that is coming in mind in your career where aligning vision and strategy made all the difference? I'm sure that that is something that is required throughout the whole process, but I'm wondering if there's one that is coming to mind.
I mean, I'll give you a simple example at Verogen. So Verogen is a next generation sequencing company that I spun out of Illumina to do forensic analysis and human ID. So all of the cold cases that have been solved recently that you hear about, the Golden State Killer, all of that, that was all done with next generation sequencing and Verogen's technology. And so the vision was replacing a 30-year-old technology, which is STRs, short tandem repeats, which is very difficult in degraded samples. It's not very informative. It's cumbersome. It takes a long time. And the vision was, let's take this new technology and apply it to this market where there's rape kits sitting on the shelf for months or years not being analyzed. There's remains in war zones that you can't identify victims, the Twin Towers victims. Like, there's all of this need for identifying individuals. There's cold cases where we've got a sample that doesn't have any match in the FBI database. And so the vision was, let's apply next generation sequencing to these problems and make law enforcement and forensic analysis much more efficient. You now not only can use degraded samples and get information from samples that you couldn't have even analyzed before, but you get phenotypic information as well. So now I have a sample of someone I don't know anything about. I can tell you their ethnicity, their age, their sex, a lot of things. And using genealogy, I can probably find their surname. So you could never do that with capillary electrophoresis technology before. And so that was the whole concept behind Verogen and why we thought it was important to make that a standalone business outside of Illumina.
Every time that I see a documentary, I'll certainly be thinking about you, especially it's a documentary about identifying remains and all of that, because it is something that is very needed. Yeah. And it was certainly, it sounds like it was a perfect place for you folks to naturally grow. And I'm wondering now, based on what I have read about you and the conversations that we've had, you have watched the life science industry evolve as a field dramatically over the last 25 years. And going back to what we were talking about, even now it's evolving even more dramatically and quicker. Yes. So I'm wondering, out of all the shifts that you can potentially predict or you're already experiencing and seeing, what are the ones that are exciting you the most?
I definitely say AI. I mentioned all the paradigm shifting technologies that came before. Most of those were chemistry related, and computers have sort of tried to keep up with the data rates of life sciences and sequencing and genomics. But AI really fundamentally changes the game, because now data can be interpreted real time. And I saw this yesterday at the Araceli demonstration. Image analysis can be done real time. Phenotypic, morphological, genomic data can be analyzed real time. And you're able to now create a loop of experimentation that is so accelerated. I mean, the Araceli instrument already scans 10 times faster than any other instrument, but that's not very useful if it takes 10 times more people to analyze the data. And so what was super exciting this week was not only are you scanning a lot more cells a lot more quickly, but the AI is enabling you to not only do quality control, but ask real biology questions in real time on the same plate. You can have the first 3 rows informing the AI of what questions to ask, and the rest of the plate actually being, interrogating those wells about what you're looking for. And so that means that trying to find the right drug for the right indication, the right combination of antibody drug conjugate can be done exponentially faster and much smarter actually than having a bunch of people in different rooms spend months, look over images and make decisions and then have to go redesign an experiment. You can stack up 5 plates in a hotel, and by the 5th plate have the answer that would have taken you 5 months before, because the AI is understanding what's going on in the first 4 plates, and it's asking a better question of the 5th plate to get to the answer quicker. So I just think it's much more than just generating lots of data. It's the large language models and the AI actually real time doing the interpretation and then iterating the experimental design in real time at the same bench in the same day. That's never been done before.
How do you see companies like Araceli changing the game? It seems like in terms of speed is one of the ones that is coming to mind, but I would love to hear about what you think.
So what's interesting is everybody's talking about artificial intelligence. Not a lot of people are talking about how do you teach it, right? So you need a teacher to become intelligent. Someone has to teach you something. You have to learn over time. And artificial intelligence is kind of useless without being able to learn or be taught. And so to me, the Araceli platform is finally able in a wet lab biology context to feed AI at the same rate that AI needs to be fed. Because you can have the fastest, most intelligent AI platform on the planet, but if it doesn't have any data or information to learn from, it's kind of useless. And so even though you can do AI very quickly, it might take years or decades to generate the data to feed it. You haven't really solved your problem because it's still taking years to generate the information to teach it. And so I think Araceli's done is kind of open up that bottleneck of biological data on the front end to really release the full power of AI to learn quickly. I kind of think of it like you get a 4-year college degree in a half an hour. You don't get that unless you have someone who can teach you at that rate. So from what I understand, AI is already being leveraged for things like radiology. So automated, at least accelerated and automated reading of MRIs and X-rays. I think there's always a physician involved, but there's a lot of AI already being used in that. There's also AI being used in medical devices. Things like insulin pumps, any kind of wearable therapeutic monitoring devices are using AI in some of the new products I've seen. I think it's like any new paradigm. There's going to be a period where there's lots of iterations of how it's getting used. And eventually it will settle into 3 or 4, 2 or 3 use modes. Probably there will be mistakes made where we rely too much on AI in certain situations and we realize it's either not smart enough, not enough data, or you still need a human involved. I think eventually it will make everybody more efficient, every process more efficient. Probably kids that are growing up right now will never have known a world without ChatGPT. And so the way their brain even solves problems is probably going to change. And when they're in the working world and doing R&D and things that we're doing today, they're probably going to approach those problems very differently. And my hope is that it allows their brains to be more creative and do more expansive things because they don't have to do some of the more mundane and repetitive things. That's what happened with computers. That's what's happened with the internet. But I think there will be a period of transition where everybody's uncomfortable and there's a generational difference in how we think about it, right? I think people in my generation are probably thinking, I don't understand it. People a generation below me are worried they're going to lose their job, and people below them will never have known a world without it, and it's going to be normal. So these things take generational time to incorporate themselves into the economy and into the society. But I do think it will accelerate everything we do and hopefully drive efficiency into the whole system of product development, R&D, technology, healthcare, everything.
We definitely share that aspiration for AI. I also agree that it has so much potential to making everything more efficient. And now I would like to switch gears and go a little bit behind the scenes. I want to talk a little bit about your journey and your philosophy. So I was wondering, looking back, what was one defining moment that shaped your approach to leadership?
It was when I was at Illumina. My first several years there, I was in charge of all the customer support. So that's the FASs, the tech support, the customer service, field service engineers, training. And I really enjoyed that. And I built a very successful 300-400 person team globally. We were a profit center. But one of my jobs was to go to the executive staff meetings with the CEO and all the high level guys and tell them what product quality issues and customer complaints we had. And so for a long time, I was sort of the complaint guy. So sales would stand up and talk about how much money they made. Marketing would stand up and talk about the cool meetings they were going to. And then I would stand up and say, here's all the stuff we're not doing very well. It was very hard for me in my own career to figure out how do I turn that persona into something more productive. And what I did was I looked at how everybody else talked about the business. And I had no business training, just experience. And I realized if instead of coming to these meetings and saying, these are the 5 biggest complaints we had about our products, these are the failure modes, and these are the things we're doing to solve it, which is a very technical approach. I flipped the script and I said, if we made an investment of X dollars to improve this product, I will save the company Y dollars in service and support, and I will accelerate the utilization rate of the machines. So it was really just taking the same data and packaging it for the audience in a solution-oriented way with economic context, if that makes sense. And that single decision changed the trajectory of my career path from being a really good service and support guy to being a business leader.
I've been in awe with how much of a successful career you've had, how you have been able to really go through it and grow as a person. And I'm wondering what continues to motivate you nowadays after having such an accomplished career and continue being involved in the life sciences field?
What motivates me is it's really been fun to work with companies like Araceli and see the new technology and stay in touch with how the field is accelerating and progressing. It's been really interesting for me to be involved as an investor, an advisor, board member, because I can look at the business from a variety of perspectives. When you're in it and you're running it, you're really focused on execution and the next day and the next quarter. Being able to step back and appreciate the innovation and back to my first tech service job, solving the problem. What's the problem we're trying to solve? How does this technology fit within market need? How do you go to market with this? How do you stay ahead of the competition? It's a much more cerebral activity as an advisor. You're not actually doing it, but there's so many cool companies and technologies right now. It's just really fun to be a little small part of the conversation with those companies.
In your view, where will you think that we're going to be seeing the most meaningful differentiation in the field of life sciences? So for example, could it be in the way that we're acquiring data, the technologies that we're using, or even perhaps the leadership mindset?
I think the leadership mindset has to stay the same. It has to evolve quickly with the business, but in terms of treating people the right way, there's a human element to that that's not going to, I hope, change. The way we use data is going to change significantly because of AI, and not just use data, but make decisions. It's going to be interesting to see to what extent AI drives consolidation of data for the purposes of a human deciding, and to what extent AI starts making the decisions on the data. I think that's going to be the biggest change. Because in the past, it was how do I generate better data, more data? And then it was how do I use AI to aggregate the data and make sense of the data? And I think what's going to happen is to what extent can AI actually make decisions about the data and action those decisions, whether it's the next experiment or the design of a product. That's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves.
Definitely going to change the way that we interact with the data, the conclusions that we gain from it, and what directions we're going to go from there. So I totally sympathize with that. And to wrap up, and do a little bit of a call for action. Okay. I'm wondering, for listeners who want to learn more about you or want to be able to reach out to you, is there a place where they should go?
I'm on LinkedIn, Kirk Malloy, or my email address, kirk@bioadvisors.com. But yeah, I'd always like to hear about new companies, new technologies, and if there's something I can help to get something growing or more successful, I'm always happy to do it.
Absolutely. So you heard it here. Go on LinkedIn, Kirk Malloy, and we'll certainly have it also on the note description. So you folks can also be able to click on it and get in touch with Kirk. And as our last question before we wrap up, I was wondering if you have any advice that you would give any emerging leaders in biotech about staying visionary in such a data-driven world and with the quick change rate that we're experiencing now.
You have to stay current on all of the different business models out there. There's so many new business models, and if you don't pay attention, your business model is going to be obsolete before you can even deploy it. So whether it's reading or podcasts or investor reports, you just have to stay on top and think really differently about how to build a business because it's really different than it was even 5 years ago. Don't forget about the human element of the business, because in the age of AI and technology and fast-moving competition, at the end of the day, the humans are getting it done, and they're your most valuable resource. I know that's cliche, but it's very easy to focus on tech and kind of forget about the people doing the work, because that's where all of the most important work gets done.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of a shameless plug. We in Science in Real Time are always trying to stay on the curve, up in the curve, and highlighting the folks who are behind this. So it fills my heart very, very much so to hear that that is something that folks really find value on. Yeah. And that pretty much concludes our time together. And as I mentioned in the description notes, you folks can find all of the information about Kirk, so you folks can actually reach out to him and have communications with him. And I hope that this is not the last time that we see each other. Naturally, in Araceli, we'll definitely cross paths again, but this was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for tuning into Science in Real Time. We're really glad that you were able to spend time with us. If today's conversation sparked questions or ideas, we'd love for you to keep it going. You can connect with our guest and the Science in Real Time team using the links in the description box below. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who loves science as much as you do. Until next time, thanks for watching.